Hey friends, I'm the Saxophone Oracle. This week we're talking about playing outside. I'm going to share with you everything that I think you need to know. So it's a little windy, not very practical to record out here, so bear with me and I'll be right with you when we get back inside. Hey folks, I'm the Saxophone Oracle. In the summer of 1959 till about the fall of 1961, the great Sonny Rollins famously took a sabbatical from performing and recording, and he spent his days outside on New York City's Williamsburg Bridge practicing his saxophone. Jazz aficionados, of course, are well aware of this story. Everyone thinks it's so romantic. Sonny took the time and he went to go and perfect everything, and then he triumphantly came back and all that. But it really is quite interesting. And in fact, if you're not familiar with this, there's a fantastic interview and article with Sonny Rollins published in the Guardian newspaper this year in January 2022. It's available on the interweb, so if you search in your Google Sonny Rollins Bridge interview, you'll come across it, and it's quite an interesting read. It's the middle of summer in North America, so let's talk about some of the reasons why I think it's useful to go outdoors and practice from time to time. First of all, if you live in an apartment or a condominium or have some other co-living situation with roommates or family members who want their peace and quiet, sisters and brothers need to study, whatever it is, going outside is a great way of getting some privacy while still allowing you to put full air into your saxophone without disturbing the neighbors or whoever else is around the house. It's practical. It costs nothing to go outside and play. You don't have to rent the space outdoors. And on top of that, you're getting some fresh air, you're getting some sunlight, which really does beat staring at the paint on the wall for hours on end. Second thing, on the topic of putting full air into the saxophone. This is important for all saxophone players to do, but for beginners in particular, this is really, really important. Beginners need to start by learning how to put full air into the horn and playing at full volume, because this is key to developing a really solid foundation in terms of your embouchure and sound. I have an in-depth video about embouchure that I'd encourage you to check out. I think you'll find it very, very helpful. But the overall principles of developing a good sound and a good embouchure is about being relaxed and allowing the reed to vibrate as freely as humanly possible. And one of the simplest ways to do that is by starting out and playing at full volume. All too often, beginner players, they start playing, they hear how loud the sound is that's coming out of the horn, and they immediately try and choke it off. And they start developing bad habits like poor breath support or way too much embouchure pressure and things like that, pinching the reed. And you don't want to do this. It's contrary to good sound and good embouchure. It's the thing about saxophone, when you're learning to play, you have to start by learning to play at full volume. And as you become more comfortable and in more command of the instrument, eventually you learn how to dial it back and play at softer dynamics properly using your breath control. Okay? And one of the best ways to learn how to do this is by playing outside. You're free to put all the air, you're not bothering anyone, and you're not having the sound reflecting off of walls and everything coming back at you and overwhelming you. Third thing I want to say, speaking of sound reflecting off of walls indoors and all of that, almost every saxophone player on the planet plays facing the wall. There are even some saxophone players who buy these ridiculous reflectors that they clip to their bell or their instrument. And if your goal is to develop a fuller, more complex, more resonant sound, then this is completely the wrong approach, right? You're not helping yourself by playing against the wall and having everything bounce right back at you. You're not getting a true picture of your tone. And when you play outdoors, the sound dissipates everywhere because you don't have these surfaces bouncing back to you. And when you're not used to it, at first people usually hate it. They're like, oh, I can't hear myself, or it doesn't sound good, I don't like it. But what you're actually hearing is the pure, unenhanced sound of the saxophone. There's no reverb, it's just a dry saxophone sound. So if you play outside and practice your sound exercises, things like long tones and overtones, this is an excellent way to develop more color and vibrancy in your sound. And it's going to give you a much deeper understanding of sound and the mechanics of sound production. Having said that, the fourth thing I want to say, or probably just remind people, is that even though we're playing outside, we do have to maintain a proper embouchure, control of our breathing, and all of this. And because the sound does dissipate so much, our natural tendency is to overdo it. We tend to overblow, and the embouchure goes all out the window. And that's because we're focusing on volume over the sound itself. And I think saxophone players in general really confuse the idea of a big, beautiful, resonant sound with volume. We always hear saxophone players saying, oh, he or she has such an enormous sound. And usually what they're talking about is volume and not really the complexity and the tone color that they're producing. And that's what we want to be working on. And outside is a great place to do it. So just be mindful that you're not letting the embouchure and control go out the window. The fifth and final thing I want to discuss on this topic is basically that playing outdoors is a very common performance situation, right? So practicing outside is a great way to prepare yourself for these types of gigs. Off the top of my head, I can think of, marching bands, or a lot of people like to go out busking. Most jazz festivals, you're going to find yourself in an outdoor situation. Cocktail parties, weddings, all kinds of things like this. And in a professional situation, it's extremely common. You're going to find yourself playing outdoors a lot. So having a little experience goes a long way. How are you going to deal with the elements? How is the instrument going to react to hot or cold or humidity, the tuning? How are your reeds going to react to certain things? How are you going to react, right? Are you going to have the same stamina as you would when you're playing in a controlled environment? Is there anything you need to do a little more differently? So a little experience with this goes a long way. I used to play every year a parade in the winter in upstate New York, right? Yes, in the winter. We're talking February, upstate New York, temperatures like -10, -15 Celsius. It's completely ridiculous, but I would do this every year. And when you do a parade like this, you can instantly see who the pros are and who aren't, or the people at least who have experience doing this kind of thing before. Because when you do a parade, everyone's corralled, right? Because they have to send out the floats in a certain order and the bands in a certain order and the twirlers or whatever it is. So you sit around, you spend a good half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour just waiting. So as a pro, I'm going in knowing, okay, the horn's going to be flat. I'm going to have to push in so many centimeters. I'm going to have to compensate this way and that way, right? Whereas all the other musicians, they're treating it as if they're playing indoors. So they have their horn set up the same way and they're trying to keep it warm. They're constantly putting air through the horn and trying to keep it ready for when they play, and 45 minutes later, of course, I know the condensation is eventually gonna freeze. So the parade starts and half the people can't even play their instruments. Whereas I haven't touched the instrument, I put it together, off we go, and by the end of the parade, I'm one of the only saxophone players who can still play the horn from top to bottom because the condensation is frozen over their pads or over the tone holes, brass players, their valves, C's and stuff like that. I get to the end of the parade, I put the horn down and I let it warm up, and once everything is fine and normal again, I swab it out, I put it back together, and it's like any other day of the week. Whereas a lot of the other saxophone players and stuff, now they have ripped pads or they bent their keys trying to make the ice move, and they're at the repair shop. I know this is an extreme example, but the point is you're going to have to play outside. So it's a good idea to get some experience doing it beforehand. I'm the Saxophone Oracle. It's the middle of summer here in North America, so I thought what a perfect time to talk about playing outdoors. I hope all of you and your families are able to get out and enjoy the great summer weather. Thank you as always for your continued support. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing, send me a like, leave a comment, share with your friends. All these little things make it so that YouTube learns to put my videos in front of more people's faces, and I'd really appreciate it. Thanks again. I wish you a great week. Happy practicing. See you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.